Hi, my name is Maggie Neal. I'm a student at the University of Kansas, and for this podcast I'm going to teach a math lesson. The math lesson is titled The Parts and Whole of a Tin Frame, and the intended grade level is first grade. The necessary materials for this lesson include number cards, yellow and red colored counters, and tin frames. The goals and objectives of this lesson include: students will use colored counters on a tin frame to demonstrate their understanding of parts of 10, and students will determine how the number 10 can be represented in two parts by using tin frames and colored counters. To begin this lesson and to have students do this, have them participate in a connection activity as the final intro activity. This will get them engaged and interested in the subject matter. Ask 10 students to stand up. Then ask 3 of those students to raise their hand. Next, discuss with the students in the group what the number 3 represents and how the number 3 represents a part of those 10 students standing up, which is the whole. Ask the students, how many children are in the group? What is the whole? And how many children have their hands raised? Chapter 1. Exploration. During the explore activity of this lesson, you are going to pose the following problem to your students. Andy and Jacqueline went to buy some hats. There are red and yellow hats in the store. Together, they have enough money to buy 10 hats in all. Using the counters on the tin frame, show how many hats of each color Andy and Jacqueline could buy. Now, there are many different options for the parts of the whole to represent the 10 different hats that Andy and Jacqueline are going to buy, which is why your students are going to use the tin frame and the 4 number sentences on page 99 of their workbook when completing this exploration activity. At this time, give your students the number cards, the colored counters, and their workbook packet that contains pages 99 to 102, and have them get into their math partners. After the children have done so, tell them to take a look at page 99 of their packet, parts of 10. Tell the students that they are going to take their number cards and they're going to pull a number from the pile. Once they pull the number, they're going to represent that number with red counters and then determine how many yellow counters they would need to add in order to fill up the tin frame. After representing the parts of the whole tin frame, they are then going to write their answers on the number sentence and fill in the 4 number sentences. Once the students have finished completing numbers 1 through 4 on page 99 with their math partners, have them discuss the parts of 10 that they found. Bring them back together for a group discussion to make sure that they understand and know that they were looking at the red counters as one part of the 10 frame and the yellow counters as the second part of 10. Chapter 2. Visual learning. After completing the exploration activity on page 99 and going through the student discussion over the exploration activity, ask the students to please turn to page 100 and page 101 of their work booklet. Across the top of the page, they should see 4 boxes outlined in pink, and this spans across page 100 and page 101. This is called the visual learning bridge. Bring your students' attention to this visual learning bridge. Remind the students that during this lesson, the goals are to learn how to use a tin frame and counters to show how 10 can be broken into different parts, which is just what the students explored during the exploration activity. Now, go through the visual learning bridge with the students. Call the students' attention to the first box of the visual learning bridge on page 100. As you can see, the first box says you can use a 10 frame to show parts of 10. As you can see, the 10 frame, an empty 10 frame is represented there for the students to visualize, as well as 10 counters are represented on the bottom. After bringing students' attention to this and having them tell you which one's the 10 frame and what the colored counters are, move on to the next box, which it guides you with a little arrow. The next box on page 100 says 6 is one part. And as can be seen from the 10 frame in this box, the 6 red counters have been placed in the 10 frame. And please make note that they start in the top left-hand box and they move all the way across and fill up the 5 boxes of the top row before moving to the bottom row on the left-hand side. After students' attention has been brought to this and they have noticed this and you guys have talked about it, please move on to the next box, which is at the top of page 101. At the top of this box it says 4 is the other part. And as students will be able to see, the rest of the 10 frame, the 4 empty spaces, are now filled in with 4 yellow counters. And it can be seen that there are 6 red counters and 4 yellow counters. And you can make note that the line is pointing to the filled up 10 frame. After it has been determined that the entire 10 frame is filled up, you can finally move on to the last box of the visual learning bridge on page 101 at the top. And it has created a number sentence that says 10 is 6 and 4. And from this number sentence, you can see that 10 is the whole and the 2 parts are 6 and 4. Chapter 3, Guided Practice. After completing the visual learning bridge, focus the student's attention onto the guided practice section of page 100. Remind the students that by using different colored counters, it is easier to distinguish clearly the different parts of 10. Have the students take a look at the directions under the guided practice section. The directions say, write the numbers that show ways to make 10. Looking at number 1, they have kind of done an example for you. In number 1, you're going to prompt the students to tell you the different parts of 10 based on the number of red counters that fill up the 10 frame and the number of yellow counters that fill up the 10 frame. Ask the students, how many red counters fill up the 10 frame? They will see that there are 4. Then ask the students how many yellow counters are in the 10 frame to completely fill it up. And they should tell you 6. Once the students have determined that the number of red counters is 4 and the number of yellow counters is 6, have them complete the number sentence below the 10 frame and then say it aloud with you. Have them say, 10 is 4 and 6. Following number 1, call on a student to help you with number 10. Ask that student, how many red counters fill up the 10 frame? That student should tell you 7. Ask the student what that number represents and have them write it where it belongs in the number sentence. The student should note that the 7 red counters represent the first part of the whole, and they should write 7 on that first line. Call on another student to tell you how many yellow counters are needed to continue filling up the 10 frame completely. That student should tell you that 3 yellow counters are needed to fill up the 10 frame completely, and then have the students write that number on the second line in the number sentence. Once every student has completed that, as a group, read the number sentence together. 10 is 7 and 3. Now have the students look at number 3. Call on another student to tell you the first part of this 10 frame. The student should tell you that there are 9 red counters and that those red counters represent the first part of the 10 frame on number 3. Call on another student to tell you the second part of the 10 frame in number 3. That student should tell you that the 1 yellow counter represents the second part of the 10 frame. After the student has told you this, and after all of the students have written down 9 on the first blank and 1 on the second blank, read the number sentence as a class together. 10 is 9 and 1. Now let's look at number 4. Call on a student to tell you the first part of the whole in this 10 frame. The student should tell you that there are 10 yellow counters in this 10 frame and that those 10 yellow counters represent the first part of the whole. Now call on a student and ask them what the second part of this whole is. This student should tell you that the second part of the whole is 0. Have the students write down these 2 parts of the whole and say the number sentence together as a class. 10 is 10 and 0. Before ending the guided practice section of this lesson, call the students' attention to the very bottom of page 100. The section titled, "Do you understand?" Ask a student to read with you the question under the "Do you understand?" headline. The question is, how many more counters do you need to make 10? How do you know? Ask the student who helped you read the question to please tell you how many yellow counters are in the 10 frame. They should tell you that there are 8 yellow counters in the 10 frame. Call on another student to answer the question, which is how many more counters are needed to make 10. The answer is 2, and the student should tell you that they will need 2 more counters to make 10. Ask the students to use a red crayon or colored pencil to make the 2 counters and fill those 2 counters in and put them in the 10 frame. Independent practice. Now that you have gone through the instructional activities of this lesson and participated in the guided practice with your students, draw their attention to the independent practice on page 101, numbers 5 through 9. Tell the students that they are going to go back to their desks and complete numbers 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on their own. Remind them that you will be walking around the room as they complete these problems to make sure that they are understanding the concepts, don't have any questions, and that they're maintaining focus and staying on task. Tell the students that once they are done, and if they finish early, that they can complete numbers 10, 11, and 12 on page 102. After giving the students time to complete this, here's the answers that they should have for their guided practice and the problem solving on page 102. Remind the students that in this lesson they learned that you can use a 10 frame to show different parts of 10. So now they know that 10 can be broken down into parts of a whole. Ask the students to tell you some of the different parts that make up the number 10. Acceptable answers include 4 and 6, 5 and 5, 1 and 9, 2 and 8, 3 and 7, and 0 and 10. Since that review concludes this lesson, thank the students for participating in the lesson and doing such a great job, and tell them as they go back to their seats you are going to collect their student work booklets for your evaluation.